All right, ladies and
Good
gentlemen.
evening, y'all.
Good evening,
I just
y'all.
want to say good evening because
I just want to say good evening
back.
because we're back.
Black Factor is
The Black Factor is back. We are back in the building. And right away, let me start and say Big Nate Hampton is checking right in, and so is Val Wells. Y'all are at the top of my list, don't you know? Okay, y'all. Man, it's been a heavy day. We got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to challenge your brains today. I'm going to hit home with a topic that I know is sure to rattle some feathers, and that is about discipline. Discipline as it pertains to our children and the way we raise our babies in this society. Some things have come up over the last couple of days in my circle, and it just left me thinking about a few things, and I want to see what y'all think. So we're going to get this party started. So y'all hang tight, and we all right. I see you, Riri, checking in. Thank you. How you doing? Good to see you. Why is somebody ringing my doorbell right now? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Black Factor, where perspective is everything, and we got the news that you can use. And y'all, as usual, these are the last couple of days with Periscope. They're winding down. We won't be using that platform any longer. It'll be on Twitter, which it is already, but just for the record. So if you're on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, hit all of those notification buttons, and do all of those things that we need you to do in order to support the show so we can maintain our position in the game. We got to stay alive, y'all. And my so smooth radio family, thank y'all for checking in. This is the evening where we do our simulcast every Wednesday at 7, because of course we are on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7. But you know, my so smooth folks hang out with me through podcast on Wednesday, and you can download that app, that so smooth radio app, and I promise you, y'all will enjoy it. If you love music, so smooth radio is the bomb, man. It is the bomb. When I'm sitting around, I want to listen to something real good, I put on my so smooth radio app, and you should too. So y'all keep that in mind as you travel about your day. Y'all, I was feeling some kind of way today, y'all. You know, I watched this Derek Chauvin trial today, and they repeatedly played body camera footage. They played body camera footage from almost every officer that was out there. Not almost, they played it from all of them. And it gave a different perspective for each one of those times. Now, I already had my feelings about what was going on, but these videos today kind of made me feel even more probably frustrated and helpless and questioning where we are in America, particularly as black people. The only thing that those videos left me contemplating, had me thinking today, it got me to thinking after we watched those videos. How many movies have we seen where you try to, the author of the movie, the director, the people who are dealing with it, try to give you some idea of what it feels like to go through trauma. You know, them old slave movies, when you watching them and they talking about, you know, they whipping people and hanging people and torturing black folks, black bodies and that sort of thing. And you kind of get a feel for, you know, some people are more sensitive to that than others, and they get very, very angry. Some people feel sorrow. Some people feel levels of hatred. Some people feel levels of pain. But I got to thinking about all of this, right? And the only thing we can do is try and imagine what all of that was like during those times when all of that was legal. It's questionable as to whether or not it still is. And you think about when black people were attacked for the most innocuous reasons, especially like you have the barbecuing while black, walking while black, going into Starbucks while black today. Not allowed to live just because that's who you are and what you do, but you have to be concerned about what the outcome may be behind that. And it reminded me of the movies where, white folks would torture and hang black folks. And even more so when I think about all the stories from my elders and the civil rights soldiers that have put in the work throughout the history, the last 150 years of this supposed and so-called freedom that we are supposed to be promised and guaranteed through what we know as the Constitution and our inalienable rights and our ability to be human. We've heard all the horrendous tales over the years. We've seen the photographs of the burnt bodies, of burnt and dismembered and disfigured bodies at the hands of hateful people, the torture and the lynching, and just how bad it is and how bad it can be. Well, I ain't gonna lie to y'all. I feel today like I witnessed a lynching. Watching those videos. There were videos that they had never shown before, and we saw them today. And I can tell you that I was quite unnerved by it. I ain't gonna lie to y'all, watching this trial, it's a bit draining. It's a bit debilitating because you realize that you've witnessed and are witnessing over and over and over and over the lynching of a black man on American streets in 2021, right in front of everybody. The only saving grace here is that those who are responsible are, as far as we know, being held accountable. We'll see how that goes. But I want to remind everybody of one very important fact. George Floyd is not on trial. I will repeat, George Floyd is not on trial. Derek Chauvin, and this is the opinion of myself and not necessarily those who support me or anyone around me, Derek Chauvin is an animal. The more I watch those videos, the more it disturbs me to watch the satisfaction in his face and to watch the movements, the subtleties in his ability to dig his knee into the neck of that man as though he were salivating and enjoying every nudge that he took. I want you to know that it bothered me greatly. I hope that he goes to prison and serves time for his crime. I hope that all of those who were involved with him go to prison and serve their time because each and every one of them had something to do with it. Now, I was the other day when the martial art gentleman, I think his name was Donald Williams or something like that, I can't remember. He made mention of the fact that applied weight and those sorts of things to a body, particularly to the neck, and the damage that could be done. And when you really see these videos, see all of the video that we saw prior to this week had been video of, from the vantage point of standing in front or behind that vehicle, in front of that cop, and that's all we saw. But when you see the other side of it, and you realize that there were 3 grown-ass men laying on the back of George Floyd. Now let's think about this. How many times have we, and in the black community, we're real familiar with the bigger the blacker you are, the more they want to attack you. See, for those of you who are not a part of the black community and you're not familiar with that concept, I can assure you that it is a thing, and it is a very bad thing, because we have some very harmless, large black men in our community who do not deserve the hatred that they receive because of their appearance. In fact, black skin is not a crime. It is not a weapon, and it should not have anything to do with the respect due to an individual human being. But unfortunately, we know we live in a different world. The mention was made by that particular attorney that he was 6'3" and 223 pounds or 25 pounds or whatever he was, as if to say that they were going to have a difficult time containing him. Now, from the videos I saw, he was already inside the police car, although he may have been making noise and resisting. They had him in the police car. He'd been handcuffed the entire time. What prompted them to drag him out of the police car, to lay him on the ground, to basically put, let's see, a couple of those guys were a little smaller. Let's say they're about 175, 180. Let's say 3, 4, 5, and then Chauvin, he had to be about 190 at least. So we talking about collectively probably 500 pounds on this guy. On his back, handcuffed, can't breathe, knee on his neck. And they want desperately to try and make us all believe that this was some sort of a drug-induced cardiac arrest. Well, all I have to say is that this is a classic case of believe what I tell you and not what you saw. We'll see. Now, the thing that I find even more interesting about this particular case, let's put it in perspective. This was a nonviolent crime. Supposedly, there was a counterfeit $20 bill. The escalation of the situation came specifically from the police department. But let's play let's play the what if game. What if George Floyd had been a white man who was accused of using a counterfeit bill? But now I want you to pay attention to something that struck me. Whoever these people, well, the Cup Food employee who called the police, he actually had the time to call the police, and the police actually show up after they had been outside twice to confront him about this $20 bill. And he still sat there. Now, if I'm a criminal and I'm a guy who's passing counterfeit money knowingly, am I really going to sit there kicking it with my homie? They were sitting there he had his door open, they out there kicking it. Am I going to really be sitting there kicking it with my homie where I just committed a crime, waiting for the police to show up? Come on, man. So let's just say this were a white guy. I imagine, based on what I know, the police would have showed up. Oh, yeah, so they say you got a counterfeit bill. Okay, well, tell you what, let's go back in here and talk about it, see what's going on. He would not have approached George Floyd, that white man, the way he approached George Floyd, up the side of his car with a pistol in his hand, telling him to put his hands where he can see him. Now let's remember, nonviolent crime met with escalated tension unnecessarily by none other than those who took part in his murder. See, they already had it in their head what was up. But I just wonder, would he have been given the benefit of the doubt if his complexion matched the connection? Right from the beginning, walked up to the car, drew a weapon, stopped digging around. Oh, you fit the description. Oh boy, how many times have we heard that? And all the other, stop resisting. You fit the description. You had a taillight out. And how many other excuses and lies have been used to lynch black people throughout the history of this country? Repeatedly. Was this officer scared? Was he afraid for his life when he walked up to the car with his weapon out, drawn, pointing at George Floyd? Was he in fear for his safety? Or was he there to intimidate George Floyd and the passengers in his vehicle? Because I'm still trying to understand what made it okay for a nonviolent crime for him to walk up and pull a pistol and behave that way. Counterfeit bill. Oh, let me pull my gun. You might kill me because you had a counterfeit bill. Come on, man. So the question becomes, did the Minneapolis Police Department, those 4 officers in particular, punish George Floyd for not doing as he was told? Discipline. Was that their form of discipline? First we're going to intimidate you, then we're going to rough you up, and then ultimately we're going to lynch you, we're going to hang you, we're going to drag you. Was that their discipline? What that they doled on the street? Justice system be damned. What happened to reasonable doubt? What happened to trials? What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Was that a punishment? So in the aftermath of all this, you got to remember something. And here's something else. Now, this all goes into the trauma of discipline. See, I'm going to tie this together for you today so you get a real good understanding of where I'm going with this. The aftermath and the trauma of the bystanders, right? Witnesses who are clearly shaken, especially today, because they all had to relive these events and they actually had to watch it from different angles multiple times, over and over and over. They played the body cam from every officer, cameras from across the street, people's phones, cell phone cameras. They played all of this over and over and over. And every time you get to hear George Floyd beg for his life repeatedly, while we watch Derek Chauvin, with his hand in his pocket and his sunglasses on his head, readjust his foot multiple times to make more pressure on George Floyd's neck. The young 18-year-old, Darnella Frazier, she said today on the stand that she literally stays up nights apologizing to George Floyd for not having done more, for not being able to make it stop. What the hell is that? Traumatized. And of course we know mental health. We've dealt with that on this show multiple times. We know that the mental health of people is already at a stress rate. And then you have to watch a man die while you stand by helplessly and do absolutely nothing. Why? Because you can't. Because you put your own health and safety at risk by doing that. The Cup Food store employee, Christopher Martin, the cashier, he said on the stand today that all of this could have been avoided if he had just not taken the $20 bill. And he blames himself. Now, he said as he watched George Floyd being arrested and murdered, that he was having feelings of disbelief and guilt for this whole thing escalating to where it is. Discipline. Trauma. And we talking about the black community now, y'all. So where this happened, this is who it happened to. The young man is black. The young girl was black. George Floyd is black. Now here's an interesting tidbit. The cashier he stated that he had rejected a counterfeit bill earlier that day by the guy who was actually with George Floyd, Mr. Maurice Hall. He recognized him from an earlier altercation where he tried to pass a counterfeit bill and that he didn't take. So he says he doesn't believe that George Floyd knew that this bill was counterfeit. So now it got me to thinking. He already knew about these counterfeit bills, this guy, this cashier. But he did take one, knowing that it could potentially be a problem. The friend, the supposed friend, the guy who claims, if you watch the video, he was getting a ride from George Floyd, him and some woman who they never did identify, or that I'm aware of. They were getting a ride from him. And you could see him sitting there on the side of the car, start rattling, just talking, breaking the number one rule of people. If you're going to be involved in anything shady, you shut your damn mouth. Well, he went to talking. And it turns out that in his attempts to make explanation, this is when all of the madness started with George Floyd, where they handcuffed him and escalated the situation repeatedly. Next thing you know, turns out that after all of this took place, Maurice Hall fled Minneapolis. I probably shouldn't say fled, because I don't know if he ran, although he did leave Minneapolis because he didn't want that smoke. He didn't know what was coming next. But it makes me wonder, after this next part, what was really on his mind. So they're sitting there, had been there for a minute. Police show up, because I'm still trying to figure out who hangs around and kick it after they realize that or if they knowingly committed a crime. I can't see that. If I'm passing a bad $20 bill, I know I'm passing a bad $20 bill, the last thing I'm going to do is sit there and wait on 5-0 to show up. Common sense 101. Now, he's on both witness lists. He's on the prosecution and the defense witness list. However, he claimed today, Mr. Maurice Hall, that if he is questioned on the stand after having watched the videos of today and the other things that came out which involved his person, because he was in some of the videos, he says he will now plead the fifth if questioned. That's interesting. Now, why would he want to plead the fifth? If your friend or somebody that you knew who was murdered right in front of you this was a trial of his killer, wouldn't you want to be a witness and be able to explain your side of the story, your position of how this happened, and to talk about the events of the day that would prosecute your friend's killer? Well, this guy says he's going to plead the fifth. He has concerns of potential criminal charges of some kind, apparently, and he has a public defender as a lawyer. Now, I remember this guy did an interview shortly after the incident, and I do believe he wasn't the sharpest tool in the drawer, but, that has nothing to do with it. But, you could tell when people are not necessarily as articulate as they might like to be or be able to explain themselves clearly. So, maybe, just maybe, he's aware enough of his situation to know not to jump out there and do too much. 61-year-old Charles McMillan today broke down on the stand, tearing and sobbing openly. They actually had to take a recess because he got to crying so hard. He was crying because they played the video again of George Floyd's death, and in the midst of that, he broke down quite a bit. They took a recess and came back, and he finished his testimony. But it turns out that this same guy who was the bystander, he was the one, if you ever watched the video, he was the one standing there saying, man, you can't win. Just get up and get in the car. You can't win. That was him. Well, it turns out that he had an encounter with Derek Chauvin 5 days earlier. And his words to him as he departed from the altercation that apparently was not a good one to that officer was, you be safe and go home tonight. And you let that man be safe and go home tonight too. So that broke him down even further. He remembered that officer from another encounter that apparently was on its way to also coming unglued. So this guy has been an accident waiting to happen for a long time, because this is not his only incident. He has other incidences of police misconduct or brutality or whatever you want to call it, overreach. But this is not his first rodeo. So, how do y'all feel about the system disciplining our men, our sons, our fathers, our husbands, and so on and so forth? Corporal punishment, y'all. So, in Montgomery County, Maryland, there is an officer, and I'm going to play this video so that you can get an idea of what took place. I'm going to explain it here in a minute, but I'm going to give you the backstory. There's a 5-year-old at a school who decides that he's going to leave, and he does so. Probably, kids probably got some behavioral issues, a lot of kids do these days, especially with the whole ADHD medications and all of this type of thing. And y'all know we talk about the education system as it pertains to young black people and their pipeline to prison, and the lack of many things, among other things, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, I'm going to try to stay on topic because there's so many directions we can go with this. It's unreal, because y'all know that, when you start talking about the education system and the prison industrial complex and the black community and all of the things that have taken place to help the worst of these be the most prevalent in our communities. So this kid decides, hey, I got somewhere to be. So he gets up, he leaves school. Well, the school calls the police. The police find the boy, and they begin to tell him that he has to come back to the school. Now, the problem is the way the officer spoke to the young man. And this was a woman, a female officer, female black officer, who apparently said to him at least 15 times, or said to the people at the school, that he should be beaten and thrown in a crate, like one of those dog crates. They berated him and treated him as an adult. Talk to him like he was grown. Let me put it that way. We're talking about a 5-year-old. We're talking about a child whose scope of the world is limited at this point. I mean, let's be real. It's a 5-year-old. Don't get me wrong. There's some smart 5-year-olds out here, but this is not a thing. So let me play this video for you. Okay, so during this altercation, the boy was handcuffed and told that he was going to be thrown in jail. And let me just tell you like this. It's a 51-minute video. There's a body cam that goes with it. I apologize for apparently we have I had a sound issue with the clip. That's my bad, y'all. But let me suggest to you, because it doesn't matter really, because I have to be careful about what I play and don't play on these broadcasts, because people get to hollering about copyright and that kind of thing. So let me just say this. It's a 51-minute clip. Do yourself a favor and go on YouTube or one of the other platforms and Google it. Because every one of the videos that I've seen from every news outlet has different portions of the 51-minute video, all of which are quite appalling. When you get off this show, just look it up. But let me say this. Here's a 5-year-old. Now, I want all of you all to, depending on whatever your position in life is, your age in life, some of you are still having children. Some of us have grandchildren. Some of us are, all our kids are grown and gone and that sort of thing. But what we can do is reflect on our own upbringing and reflect on the upbringing of our children and what we did. Now, there's a strong notion of spankings, whoopings, ass whooping, big mama and them put on you from back in the day are a product of slavery. I have been one of those people who pressed against that notion. However, the thing is this: Europeans have been beating their children for thousands of years before they ever came across the Atlantic. And the thing that I think it's just crazy because of the way our systems work where we live here in America. There are children now, especially, we got all these, kids are spoiled these days, man. They said we were spoiled in my generation, but because we weren't like our parents, who put in more work than we did. And we've tried to, every generation tries to make it easier for the next generation. But let's be honest. Some kids now think that discipline is abuse. They think that discipline, just because they cannot have what they want, they're being abused. And oh my God, their world is falling apart. Now, even Michael Jackson said his father was abusive. Well, his father abused him into a multi-million-dollar fortune. But the thing is this, and I'm guessing, my only guess is that even for myself, some of the things that I think and the way that I function, and I realize that everything has an origin. And I was raised in a household where the belt was an option. It was used when necessary. I am one of the fortunate ones who do not feel that I was abused. I felt like when I got out of line, I was given discipline in a physical format that made it easily relatable of what not to do next. Okay? Nowadays, if you think about disciplining your children physically, corporal punishment, you run the risk of going to jail. You run the risk of losing your children to foster care. Now, interesting piece of information I dug up in the midst of this, that physical ritual discipline was not practiced in West African pre-colonial societies. Not. Now, part of this goes back to our being parents, our fear of our children getting caught up and getting caught out here. So that brings me into the area where we realize that slavery definitely has had effects on how we discipline our children. Mothers enslaved absolutely had a fear of their sons being whipped or being killed because they were a male child, and if they were insubordinate, the likelihood of them getting into further trouble was high. So they employed probably the same tactics, so to speak, that their oppressors did in order to get their child in line, because I'm thinking they'd rather do it than to have master do it. The whole "this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you" speech. That's just a concept. Black children, though, today, and this is on recent studies in the last 4 or 5 years, black children are more likely to be assaulted, seriously injured, or killed by a family member than by police or neighborhood watchmen. Yearly statistics consistently show that black children are mistreated and killed significantly higher rates than white and Latino children. And that's from the Department of Housing and Human Services in 2016. Ample scientific evidence demonstrates the long-term damage resulting from physical punishment, even without marks or serious physical injuries. Black parents who hit their children not only risk drawing the attention of Child Protective Services, who are overrepresented in communities of color, much like the police are they over-police the communities, same thing, but also having their children placed into foster care, which is a pipeline to the juvenile justice system and similar adverse paths that disproportionately impact black youth. Indeed, black children stay in foster care longer and often don't receive adequate therapeutic services. So see, even when you're under the care of the state, you're still not getting the proper mental health care, as we talk about all the time on this show, that is necessary for a child to overcome these obstacles and to thrive. So, to argue that an ass whooping, was a tradition brought over from Africa, or that it is actually consistent with practice today, is simply false. Once in America, slaves as parents were under tremendous pressure to shape their children into docile field workers and to teach them proper deference and demeanor in front of whites. See, despite anything people say, these things are still in place. Child deaths, brutal whippings and torture, sexual abuse, and being sold away from their relatives for the rest of their lives were constant features of plantation life. And we have very similar scenarios that play out in our community right now today. For example, George Floyd's situation. Who wanted for him to be dead over a counterfeit $20 bill that he probably didn't even know was a $20 bill? You know doggone well if his mother had the opportunity, she would have told him, "Fool, what are you doing? Go sit down somewhere." His mother, the person that he called out for as he died on that street, face down, underneath the knee of the lynchman. After slaves were emancipated in 1865, yet still not free, the rules of racial etiquette and the ritualistic beatings continued as a new kind of coercive Southern labor system emerged that depended on black child workers. Once again, whites co-opted black parenting to make sure it performed the same kind of function in freedom that it had during slavery. With sanctioning from the black church, black parents enacted the master's lash to instill obedience. Now let's remember the lash looks similar and often very different at the same time, because now See, y'all, the game is cold. The game is cold but fair. Now, in West Africa, they say it was believed that children were ancestors who returned from the afterlife or were gods and held mystical powers. In other words, their reverence for children pre-colonization would not allow them to be physically harmful to them. But like every other thing about our culture coming from the motherland, as we were brought across the Atlantic, had been wiped away, had been destroyed. Everything that we thought we knew had been removed from us. Our language, our understandings, our professions, whatever we were was removed and reduced to being slave labor, cotton picker, tobacco picker, cane picker, rice. The list goes on. So in other words, the child rearing practices had been lost from the motherland like everything else. But then it makes you wonder if what had been instilled in our ancestors and into our culture and in our society from that time, could that be why some of the youth today are so violent? I mean, let's look at Chicago, for example. Most of the people doing the killing and the carjacking are young people. What happened that violence became the actual answer? It became the way to do things. It became the thing to do. What happened? How did we get there, y'all? That's what I want to know. But I'll say this much. During the time where those child rearing practices were taking place, pre-colonization in Africa, people were far less disrespectful. They had respect for family. They had respect for their culture and the way things were done. I mean, today, people are far more aggressive, far more disrespectful. You have children having children with no real support system in place. The list goes on and on and on about how we got here. So if being brought to this continent as slave labor, as property, and we've taken on all of the concepts handed to us by our enslavers, would it not make sense that we've become very violent and that we believe that discipline, what discipline looks like, has to do with physical lashing, physical, somebody putting their hands on you? You know, somebody said something to me one time that made like perfect sense. When we were talking about the discipline issue, and they said, you don't really need to spank your children. And I said, really? Why? He said, you're going to really let a 5-year-old outsmart you? And I thought about that. And to some degree, it does make sense. However, if you raise a child with the intelligence to deal with you on an intellectual level where you don't need to physically discipline, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is going to be an exception and not the rule. Because people just, if you think about every people you're around every day right now, some of them just don't, that just don't work. It's not going to work for them. Some people don't understand anything else. Now, that could probably be my experience. It could probably be my understanding based on what I was raised to believe. I mean, I don't really know. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I'm kind of out on a limb on that one, but I will say this. In raising my children, Yes, the belt was an option. And clearly, it worked fine. My children are fantastic human beings. They are upwardly mobile. They are extremely smart. And the list goes on. And I'm not just saying that because they are my children. I'm saying that because of the people that they have become. See, one thing I used to tell my kids all the time, I love you by virtue of being your father. But if I don't like you, we got a whole nother set of problems. I like my kids. My kids are brilliant. And I'm not just saying that because they're my kids. They've done some amazing things, to be perfectly honest with you. But if you ask any one of them right now today about a spanking they may have gotten, they will tell you they deserved it. Did it make their life miserable? Were they abused? They're going to tell you no. At the end of the day, there are some children that you could beat until the cows come home. It's not going to change anything about them. Now, I sometimes wonder, is that a parental issue or is that a child issue? Something, somewhere got broken, and we don't have enough health care in the black community to solve these problems. And it troubles me greatly when I realize that many of our children who are not and cannot be disciplined in our homes will ultimately and inevitably be disciplined in the world. George Floyd is a prime example of that. And it's not that he did anything, because that wasn't discipline, that was abuse. But the fact is, any attempts, and I'm sure his parents, they probably old school, he probably got popped upside the head a couple of times. But I'm guessing that all we can do is try to arm our children with the right information to move about in the world without, and try to avoid as much as possible what we have to deal with. The young lady who's the young man, the 5-year-old's mother, I saw one video clip, and this is why you got to watch the video to see everything that went on. The mother was there, and the officer, who is being retrained as we speak, obviously, for obvious reasons, the mother said, well, I can't discipline him because I'll go to jail, and they'll put him in foster care. So now she not only has to deal with the fact that her child, it has a behavioral issue, but she can't do anything about it and feels helpless because of the consequences of her attempting to get her child in line. And the officer said, they don't lock people up for spanking their kids. I beg to differ. In fact, I know more than a few people, as insane as it is to me, who have gone through the system, who have dealt with DCFS and DHHS and all of these other people over a spanking. In fact, I have a friend who some years ago, daughter decided she was going to stay out one night. She came home. Her mother went off. She got her ass whooped. And what did the child do? Call the police. My friend spent multiple days in jail. I literally ended up in the courtroom myself, helping to try and secure her freedom and get this situation under control. Why? Because a child felt as though they didn't want to be told what to do by their parent. And what's even crazier is that if you got an older child that's doing these type of things, you can't even put them out. So where does that leave you? Me personally, I have another friend whose child was a little older and cutting up sideways. So what he did was, like, you want to use the law? He used the law. That's what he did. He went to Walmart and he bought one of them little two-piece sweatsuits. You know, the kind with the elastic around the ankles and everything. He took everything. When she left to go to school, he took everything out of her room. Everything. Clothes, bed, you name it, it was gone. Room was empty. He left in there a comforter, a sheet, a pillow, and that sweatsuit. And he told her, I'm going to give you this meal for this day. This is what you, he said, all I'm legally obligated to do is make sure you eat, go to school, provide you with clean clothes, and that's it. And she literally had to wash and wear that same outfit every single day in order to go to and from school. So he basically removed any opportunity from her to do stuff that she didn't have no business doing. It worked. She got tired of, having to live like that and understanding it wasn't her money and he didn't owe her anything other than certain, items. And, it worked. And I thought it was a pretty brilliant thing to do. But I guess it beat her ass whooping for her anyway. So, the thing is this. We live in a society now that is violent. Not now. America is rooted. Its foundation, its very foundation is rooted in violence. It's what we've been taught. It's what we've all ever seen since we've been on this continent as long as colonization has taken place. Violence. What do we expect? And I'm not saying that an ass whooping is violent. I'm just saying that the way the system is set up now, they're finding new ways to use the law to benefit the way they want. They're just making it go the way they want it to go. You got to remember, slavery was once legal. So, society itself doesn't like discipline, especially, or unless it's, unless they can weaponize it. Kind of like, you got the Central Park lady who said she was going to tell the police that the black man was harassing her and attacking her. See, that's using the discipline system, supposedly, against black people. All of this ties together. Y'all, it's so much of this stuff. I could go all day about this topic. But I just wanted to plant these seeds, that's all. You can't shame people anymore into doing the right thing. That is a non-starter. Derek Chauvin was not ashamed whatsoever to continue kneeling in the neck of a human being as though he was an animal, like he was a cow being prepared to slaughter, being prepared to cut his throat for gain. What do you do when your child has been encouraged to call the police if they get an ass whooping? Think about it. Nowadays, the teachers, legally, by law, the teachers now have to report any marks or any type of thing like that on them. You whoop your child's ass for doing something they had no business doing, or staying out or doing something that could have got them killed or got them in trouble with the police. You give them a spanking, and you're going to have to deal with law enforcement. In other words, if you can't figure out how to psychologically control another individual, you're going to be in trouble. What do you do about that? I don't know, y'all. I don't know what y'all going to do about it. All I got to say is there was more than a few occasions where I told my kids, you can call them if you want to. I'm prepared to go to jail. So now, what you going to do? They knew I wasn't playing either. I meant it. I meant it on everything I love. But, but it's necessary for us to make sure that our kids get it. This all boils down to that talk. Y'all know Y'all black folks that's watching me know that talk that you got to have with your children if you want them to stay alive in America. If you want your kids to stay alive, you got to have that talk. You got to explain to them how to deal with the police, how not to get killed by the police. Not that it matters, because if you catch a Derek Chauvin out here, I don't care what you told your kids. I don't care how well you dressed them. I don't care what kind of information you gave to them. They're going to still end up being victims. They're going to still end up being slaughtered. They're going to still end up dying at the hands of an animal who has been sworn to protect you, by the way. Taxpayer dollars pay for that, you know. We paid for George Floyd's murder. The very foundation and principle of this country is rooted in violence. This country was born of violence. But if you be violent, you with the wrong color skin, oh, you going to jail. But I hope times are changing, because now we got Derek Chauvin potentially going to jail. Woo, can y'all imagine if this thing come back not guilty? Whew, I don't even know what to say. I hate to be that way, because I like to, you know, give people their time in court. But let's keep it real, y'all. What's going to happen if this thing come back not guilty? See, this system has effectively taken away many people's ability to deal with their children in a way that they can understand in this violent country, and then set you up for the fall if you try it. Yeah, try that. Try it. We got you. You're done. But I am going to say this. Let's be 100. Child abuse is also very real in America. I do not condone child abuse. I do not believe in people slapping their children. I do not believe in people doing things that will harm a child physically. I do believe in an ass whooping, and I don't think that those two things are synonymous. A good old-fashioned ass whooping on the buttocks gets an awful lot done. That's my opinion. It worked for me. It worked very well for my children. In fact, by the time my children were 6 or 7, probably not even that old, I didn't have to hand out no more ass whoopings. Why? Because not only did they know I was serious, they knew it was real. Don't play. Don't play no games. So we get it in around here. And they didn't want to hear nothing about, I'm going to tell your daddy when he get home. They didn't want to hear my teacher, because I told every last one of their teachers, I'm on speed dial. You have any problems out of mine, call me. I'll be right on. And they knew it. And I told them, let your teacher call me. It's going to be a problem. I promise you. And all I can say is, my kids believed me. They believed I would. They believed I'd do everything I said I would do. They knew I wasn't playing. I don't play the radio. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Brian Forbes. I want to thank you all for hanging out with me. Don't forget to get your copy of The Black Factor. Bam! At BrianBMForbes.com. Y'all are the realest of the real. Thank you for showing up and showing out. It's time for me to go. I appreciate ya. And I will keep you posted on this whole George Floyd debacle, and hopefully Derek Chauvin will get his day to be somebody's cellmate that don't like police. I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, y'all know I can't hold water. Anyway, thank you all. I love you, man. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful evening. We're going to try to get some stuff ready for you for next week, for the end of this week and next week. I'm going to be broadcasting live from Chicago very soon. So y'all get ready for that, because we're going to do some interviews. We're going to kick it a little bit, just a little bit. Y'all Man, have yourselves a great evening. I thank you. I love you. Have a good night, y'all. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and we